The War of 1812. America's forgotten fave War of 1812. The one war most Americans either forget about or confuse with the American Revolution. No, this wasn't the war where George Washington crossed the Delaware. It was the one where the British came back, burned down the White House, and then we somehow still declared victory. Confused? Don't worry, you're not alone. So how did this all start? Well, imagine you're an American sailor in the early 1800s, just minding your own business. Suddenly, a British ship shows up, kidnaps you and says, "Congrats, mate, you're in the Royal Navy now." Yeah, that was a real thing called impressment, and Britain did it a lot. It didn't exactly make Americans happy. Meanwhile, on the western frontier, Britain was secretly helping Native American tribes resist American expansion. This led to all sorts of tensions, especially with the famous Shawnee leader Tecumseh, who formed a powerful alliance to push back against settlers. Long story short, things were getting heated. Then, in 1812, President James Madison finally had enough. Congress declared war on Britain, thinking it would be a quick and easy fight. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The invasion of Canada, the first thing the US decided to do. Invade Canada? And why not? Canada was right there. Britain was distracted fighting Napoleon in Europe. And Americans assumed Canadians would welcome them as liberators. They did not. The American invasion was an absolute mess. US forces actually surrendered without firing a single shot in one battle. And Detroit was handed over to the British. Meanwhile, Canadian forces pushed the Americans back, proving that invading Canada is never as easy as it sounds. America's Navy shocks the world while things on land were going terribly. Something unexpected happened at sea. The US Navy, which was tiny compared to Britain's, started winning. One of the biggest moments came when the USS Constitution, a warship nicknamed Old Ironsides, defeated a British ship in battle. The legend goes that British cannonballs bounced off its hull, making it seem invincible. It was like Britain brought a musket to a tank fight. The British strike back by 1814. Britain was done playing around. Napoleon had been defeated in Europe, so the British could now focus entirely on America. And they did by marching straight into Washington, D.C., and burning it to the ground. Imagine you're President James Madison. You step outside, and your entire capital is on fire. What do? Well, Madison ran. His wife, Dolly Madison, had the presence of mind to save a portrait of George Washington before escaping, because apparently, even in a national crisis, Americans knew that Washington was too important to lose. The White House, the Capitol, and other government buildings were all torched. The British then moved toward Baltimore, thinking they'd crush American morale once and for all. The Star-Spangled Banner momentat, Fort McHenry in Baltimore. Americans decided they weren't going down so easily. British warships bombarded the fort all night, hoping to force a surrender. But when morning came, the American flag was still there. Watching from a British ship was a lawyer named Francis Scott Key, who was so inspired by the sight that he wrote a poem. That poem? The Star-Spangled Banner. Yes, the national anthem was basically written by a guy stuck on a boat, witnessing America getting absolutely pounded by the British Navy. The most pointless battle ever? Now, here's the funny part. In December 1814, both sides had enough and signed the Treaty of Ghent, officially ending the war. But thanks to slow communication, no one in America knew this yet. So in January 1815, the British launched one last attack on New Orleans. General Andrew Jackson, leading a mix of regular soldiers, militia, and even pirates, pulled off a stunning victory. The British suffered massive casualties. America celebrated. And then word arrived. The war was already over. It's like winning a basketball game in overtime, only to find out the ref blew the final whistle an hour ago. What did we actually win? So, what was the point of this war? America didn't gain any new land. Britain didn't either. The borders stayed the same. It was like a bar fight where both guys stagger away saying, "Yeah, well, I showed him." But in the long run, America did win something. Respect. The war proved that the US could hold its own against a superpower. It also ended British support for Native American resistance, which paved the way for America's expansion westward, though, at a tragic cost to Native peoples. And let's not forget, it gave us our national anthem, one of the best ship nicknames ever. And the hilarious irony of Andrew Jackson becoming a war hero for a battle that technically didn't T-count. Final thoughts. War of 1812 may not be as famous as the American Revolution or the Civil War, but it was a defining moment in U.S. history. It was messy, chaotic, and at times, absolutely ridiculous. But it was also a war that shaped the young nation's future. So what do you think? Should the War of 1812 get more attention? Or is it better left as America's most May war? Let me know in the comments.